I shouldn't remember the way her voice caught on that single word, stay, but it won't leave me. Maybe because it didn't sound like a command, more like something she wished she could take back as soon as it escaped. That was the first time I realized she was looking at me differently. Or maybe it was the first time I admitted I'd been looking at her that way all along. Her name's Claire, my best friend's mom. 46. Though she moves like she's trying to convince the world she's still 35. Not with vanity, but with this stubborn grace, as if age itself owes her something. Tonight, it was just the two of us. The house was quieter than usual. My friend had left for the weekend. Her husband was out of town on business. I'd only stopped by to pick up something I'd left behind, but somehow I didn't leave right away. The kitchen smelled faintly of red wine and garlic. She leaned against the counter, barefoot, hair pulled back in that messy knot she pretends is casual but looks deliberate. Her blouse had one button too many undone, though maybe that's just the way she wears it at home. You always show up at the strangest times, she said, half smiling. I shrugged, but my throat tightened. Maybe I like strange times. Her eyes flicked to me, then away, like she couldn't decide if I was joking. That was always her way, measured, cautious. She had this careful distance in how she talked to me, like she was guarding something I wasn't supposed to see. And yet, in those pauses, I felt it. A pull neither of us was naming. I tried to fill the silence. I should probably grab my stuff and head out. But I didn't move. Neither did she. Instead, she reached for her glass of wine and turned it slowly in her hand. The liquid caught the kitchen light. She didn't drink, just stared at it like it might give her an excuse. You're different lately, she murmured. Different how? Her eyes landed on mine this time, steady but searching. Older, maybe. Or maybe you've just stopped pretending. I didn't know what to say. My pulse hammered in my ears. Pretending. Yeah, I knew exactly what she meant. Pretending I didn't notice the way her laughter lingered a little longer when I was around. Pretending my chest didn't tighten when she brushed past me, when her perfume clung to my clothes after a hug. I leaned against the opposite counter, mirroring her without meaning to. You think too much, I said quietly. She almost laughed, but it broke into something else, something closer to a sigh. Then she shook her head like she was scolding herself. Don't start. The words were sharp, but her voice wasn't. It trembled. I wanted to close the space between us, but I stayed put, hands gripping the counter so tightly the edges dug into my palms. If I moved, if I said the wrong thing, whatever this was would vanish. Or worse, become something we couldn't undo. The refrigerator hummed. A clock ticked somewhere down the hall. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Claire, I said, softer than I meant. Her name seemed to freeze her. She finally lifted the glass, but when she drank, her hand shook just enough for the rim to clink against her teeth. And then, just when I thought she might say something she'd regret, the doorbell rang. The sound startled both of us. She set the glass down too quickly, red drops spilling across the counter. My heart pounded, not just from the interruption, but from the look we shared in that moment. Like whatever waited on the other side of that door wasn't half as dangerous as what had just been left unsaid between us. It was just a delivery, groceries she'd forgotten she ordered. The man at the door barely looked at me when I carried the bags inside, but my pulse still hadn't slowed from the silence we'd been sitting in moments before. Claire busied herself at the counter, unpacking vegetables one at a time like the repetition could erase what had almost happened. I watched her fingers linger too long on a tomato, the way her shoulders stiffened whenever I shifted in my chair. You don't have to help, she said without looking at me. I don't mind. Her tone was polite, distant again, but not cold, like she was putting walls back up brick by brick. I tried not to notice, but everything about the kitchen felt suddenly too small. The hum of the fridge, the scrape of paper bags, her breath when she exhaled a little too hard. I remembered then how my friend used to complain about his parents fighting, how his dad was never around, how his mom kept to herself. He'd said it like a joke, but there'd been something sharper under it. I hadn't thought much of it back then. Now it felt like a door I wasn't supposed to open. Does he know? The question slipped out before I could stop it. She froze. Her back stayed, turned to me. Know what? That you? I caught myself. My throat locked up. That you're not happy. The pause was long. Then she set the tomato down and finally faced me. Careful, she said softly. You don't know what you're asking. But I did know. Or I thought I did. Maybe I only wanted to. She leaned against the counter, arms folded. Her blouse shifted slightly, the hollow of her collarbone visible in the warm kitchen light. I forced my eyes upward, meeting hers. You're too young to carry other people's disappointments, she added, almost kind now. I'm not that young, I said, sharper than I meant. Her lips pressed together, not quite a smile, not quite disapproval. Something in between. She studied me like she was weighing a risk she already knew the answer to. Inside, my thoughts were colliding. She was my friend's mom. Married. Twice my age. Every reason screamed at me to let this die here. But then she tilted her head the slightest bit, and I couldn't shake the pull, the ache that had been building long before tonight. The air between us stretched thin. She rubbed her wrist absent-mindedly, like it ached, and I noticed the faint line where her wedding ring had been. She wasn't wearing it. Long day, I asked too softly. Her eyes flicked down, then back up. Every day feels long lately. The words hung there, heavier than anything else we'd said. And maybe it was reckless. Maybe it was the wine in her system or just the way the house seemed to hold its breath. But when I reached across the counter and brushed my fingertips against hers, she didn't pull away. She didn't move at all. Just a stillness that her fingers stayed under mine for one impossible heartbeat too long. Then the sound of a door unlocking split the silence. Claire jerked back like she'd been burned. The groceries clattered as she shoved them into the fridge. I pulled my hand to my lap, flexing it, as if to erase the memory of her skin. Mom, my friend's voice. I hadn't heard his car in the driveway. Panic twisted my chest. He wasn't supposed to be back until tomorrow. In here, she called, steady, practiced. I stood fast, trying to act like I'd just finished helping. He walked into the kitchen, backpack slung on one shoulder. His eyes flicked from me to his mother. You too? Having a party without me? He joked, but there was suspicion buried under it. Groceries, I muttered. Too quick. Too defensive. Claire smoothed her blouse, too obviously. He was just leaving. I grabbed my jacket, but my pulse was still racing. Leaving meant freedom, but also an unbearable distance I suddenly couldn't stomach. You okay, Mom? My friend asked, lingering at the counter. She forced a smile. Fine. Just tired. I nodded, avoiding his gaze, and made for the door. But as I passed her, she caught my wrist for a second, light, fleeting, hidden from her son's view. The kind of touch that said wait without a word. I didn't look back, couldn't. I left the house and walked into the cool night air, my heart pounding against my ribs like I'd committed a crime. Later, alone in my car, I couldn't stop replaying it. The warmth of her hand, the way she'd pulled back, the way she'd looked at me just before he walked in. It wasn't nothing. It couldn't be nothing. But it had to be nothing. She was married. She was my best friend's mom. And yet, the next day my phone buzzed. A text. Just a single line. Don't come over tonight. Not from her number. From my friends. Which meant he'd noticed something. Or at least, he suspected. I told myself to let it go. To respect the warning. But evening came, and I found myself parked down the street from their house anyway. Engine off, watching the windows glow against the dark. Shame crawled up my neck. I shouldn't be there. I was crossing lines I couldn't uncross. And still, I couldn't move. Then, her silhouette appeared in the upstairs window. She lingered there, motionless, as if she knew I'd be watching. I leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel. Every part of me screamed to start the car and drive away. Instead, I sat frozen, drowning in the space between what I wanted and what I shouldn't dare. The curtain shifted. For just a second, I thought she lifted her hand toward the glass. And that tiny gesture, that silent acknowledgement, was worse than any kiss could have been, because it was a promise, or a warning, or both, said more than either of us could bear to admit. The text should have been the end. A line drawn, a warning I should have obeyed. Instead, it left me restless, pacing my room until midnight, replaying every glance, every half-smile that felt like it belonged to me. By the time I found myself back at her house, I didn't even pretend to have an excuse. I parked 2 streets away, walked under the cover of dark, and stood staring at her porch light flickering in the quiet. When the door opened, she looked startled, then angry. Not the sharp anger that cuts. It was softer, like fear. You can't keep showing up, she whispered, stepping outside and closing the door behind her. The night air pressed cold between us, but her nearness burned. Then tell me to stop, I said. She shook her head, arms wrapped tight around herself. You think this is a game? You think because you want something badly enough, the world just bends for you? Her voice was trembling. and I hated how badly I wanted to touch her anyway. It's not just me, I said. Don't lie like it is. Her eyes flashed, sharp with warning, but then softened. You're 22. You don't know what you'll regret yet. I already do. The words cut. Not because they weren't true, but because they were. She'd lived through storms I couldn't imagine. Broken promises, a husband who forgot to notice her, years that slipped away without anyone asking what she wanted. And still, she stood there, telling me I was too young to understand. I can't stop thinking about you, I said before I could swallow the confession back down. My throat felt raw. Every time I try, it just gets worse. She closed her eyes like the words were both a wound and a balm. You can't say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because if you do, her voice broke. She pressed her lips together, then turned away, pacing a few steps before facing me again. Because I might believe you. The porch light buzzed above us. My heart thrashed. I wanted to step forward, erase the distance, but the weight of her son sleeping upstairs, her husband's shadow in this house, pinned me in place. Do you? I asked. Her jaw tightened. Silence. The kind that says everything words can't. Finally, she said, I ruined too many things already. I can't ruin you too. But even as she said it, her hands were trembling at her sides, like they wanted to reach for me. I took half a step closer, voice low, then stopped fighting it. Her breath caught. For a moment, it felt inevitable that she'd lean in, that our lips would close the space between. But before either of us moved, the sound of footsteps creaked from inside the house. She froze, eyes wide, and everything, her fear, my hunger, the impossible tension, hung suspended in the night air, waiting to break. The creak of footsteps inside froze her. I saw her whole body tense, like a cornered animal deciding whether to fight or flee. She pulled the door halfway open, trying to make it seem casual, like I'd just stopped by with some forgotten errand. But then her son's voice cut through the stillness. Mom. He was on the stairs, rubbing his eyes. Too old to be a child, too young to hide suspicion. He noticed everything. Claire shot me a look, sharp, pleading, and whispered under her breath, go. I backed into the shadows of the porch while she pulled the door shut behind her, leaving me out in the night. I should have walked away. I should have listened. Instead, I pressed myself against the siding, breath shallow, as if hearing their voices inside would tell me something I wasn't meant to know. Who was that? He asked. Just the neighbor, she said too quickly. My chest tightened. A lie. For me. Silence followed. Long enough to make me imagine his expression, the tilt of his head when he didn't believe her. Then he said, lower now, almost cutting, you're not even wearing your ring. My stomach dropped. Her reply was soft, nearly inaudible. It's being cleaned. Another lie. I pressed my hand to my mouth, teeth digging into my palm, caught between guilt and an impossible flicker of something else, something darker, selfish. She was already lying for me, already building walls to keep her son, her husband, the world itself out. And yet, I hated that it was happening in shadows, in whispers I wasn't meant to hear. The conversation inside ended with her sending him back upstairs, but the damage was done. When she stepped back outside, her face was pale, lips pressed tight. You shouldn't have come, she said, voice trembling. I heard, I admitted. The ring. Him asking. Her shoulders sagged, as if the weight of it finally cracked something in her. She looked at me, not with anger, but with this raw exhaustion, like a dam ready to break. He knows something's wrong, she whispered. And he's right. I haven't worn that ring in months. Not since I stopped pretending. I should have felt relief, maybe even victory. Instead, a wave of guilt surged through me. I was the fracture widening in her family, the shadow between her and her son. You think this is simple, she said, eyes flashing suddenly. That it's just about wanting. But every step closer to you, I'm tearing something else apart. Her hands shook as she held the doorframe. For a second, I thought she'd collapse. I stepped forward instinctively, catching her elbow. She didn't pull away. Instead, she whispered something so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. He'll never forgive me if he finds out. The weight of that truth pressed into my chest, heavier than desire, heavier than fear. And still, I couldn't let go of her arm. Her arm trembled under my grip, and I thought she might pull back, shut the door, end it. Instead, she just stood there, eyes burning into mine, like she was waiting for me to release her or to ruin everything in a single breath. Say it, I whispered. Say you don't feel it, and I'll walk away. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was louder than anything she could have confessed. I stepped closer, close enough that I could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her pulse flickered at her throat. The porch light buzzed, threatening to go out, throwing us in and out of shadow. You're not supposed to be here, she said, but it sounded weak, hollow. I know. My hand slid down her arm, slow, deliberate. But neither are you. Not like this. For a moment, the whole world narrowed to the space between our mouths. If I leaned in, it would happen. No turning back. Then she whispered, voice breaking, he'll hate me. The words hit harder than any slap could. Her son. My best friend. The line we'd been dancing around since the beginning. You're not ruining me, I said fiercely, surprising myself. I chose this. I'm here. You're the only one pretending I don't know what it costs. Her eyes shone, glassy in the dim light. You think love's enough? That it fixes what it breaks? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. The silence stretched, until finally she closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against mine. Not a kiss, not yet, but enough to make my entire body ache. I can't stop thinking about you, she whispered. The confession gutted me. Then stop fighting it, I breathed back. And for one impossible moment, she let herself. Her hand lifted, trembling, to the back of my neck, drawing me closer. Our lips brushed, barely, not even a kiss, more like a promise of one. A contact so brief it could be denied if she needed it to be. But it was enough. Enough to shatter the fragile line we'd both clung to. Then, her phone rang from inside the house. A harsh, mechanical sound that cut through everything. We both froze. She pulled back, breath ragged. Her wedding ring wasn't on her finger, but the name lighting up the screen inside might as well have been etched into the night. Richard. Her husband. She looked at me, eyes wide, torn open. Not just guilt now, fear. I have to answer, she said, almost choking on the words. I nodded, though my chest was splitting. She slipped inside, closing the door behind her, leaving me on the porch with the taste of almost still lingering between us. For the first time, I realized love wasn't the fire, it was the ash after, and I didn't know which of us would survive it. I sat on the porch long after she went inside. Her husband's voice carried faintly through the open window, low, casual, like he had no idea his marriage was cracking at the edges. And maybe that was the cruelest part, how easy it was for him to go on pretending. When Claire finally stepped back out, her face was calm, practiced, but her hands still shook as she crossed her arms. He's coming home early, she said. The words landed like a stone in my stomach. So that's it? I asked. My voice was sharper than I meant, but I couldn't hold it back. We just go back to pretending none of this happened? Her eyes softened. You think I want that? Then what do you want? She looked away, toward the dark street, like the answer might be out there somewhere. I want to be selfish for once. I want to stop being the version of myself that everybody else needs. Her voice broke, and then she steadied it again. But if I do that, if I choose you, everything changes. My son loses his best friend. My husband finally sees what he's ignored for years. And she shook her head. I don't know if I survive it. I took a step closer, searching her face for anything she wasn't saying. And if you don't choose me? She met my eyes then, raw and unguarded. Then I live with a different kind of ruin. The night was silent around us. Just the two of us breathing, hearts racing, knowing the world wouldn't wait for us to decide. Finally, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away this time. Our fingers intertwined, fragile, trembling, but real. I'm not afraid of the cost, I said quietly. I'm afraid of losing the only thing that's ever felt this real. Her breath hitched. And for once, she didn't argue, didn't try to protect me or shield herself. She just closed her eyes and let the weight of my words settle. When she looked at me again, her decision was there, not in words, but in the way she leaned closer, the way her grip tightened around mine. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't a neat ending tied up with promises and certainty, but it was a beginning. A dangerous, fragile, hopeful beginning. She whispered, almost like a secret to herself, then we'll stop fighting it. And in that moment, I knew, whatever came next, the lies, the consequences, the fallout, we'd already crossed the line. Together, the future might break us, or it might be the only thing that finally saved her. But for tonight, with her hand in mine under the flickering porch light, It didn't matter. We'd chosen. Redheart, did you enjoy the story? Thought Balloon, what kind of stories would you like to hear next?